Today on the channel, it's the return of the Kyle Peterson Top 5 with my top 5 favorite Curt Hennig Mr. Perfect figures. Welcome everyone, Kyle here, and welcome back to the channel for another Kyle Peterson Top 5 list. As every single week on the channel, a Thursday tradition now, we count down my 5 favorite figures. It could be of a wrestler, it could be of somebody else eventually. We're still in the wrestling headspace for now. But today I figured it was the perfect time, no pun intended, to do a top 5 Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig figures. So this is, like usual, my top 5 favorite figures from Mr. Perfect. You guys in the comments below, make sure you put your top 5 and put them in order. Like I always say, that's the challenging and the fun part of this. So make sure you put them in order. And I figured this was a great time to do Mr. Perfect. As you guys have saw my figure hunting video last week, I was up in Minnesota, Minneapolis area, home of Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig, of course. That's where he grew up, the old Robbinsdale neighborhood. His dad, a part of the AWA, himself part of the AWA. A rich history for Mr. Perfect up there in Minnesota, and I was directly across the street at the cemetery Mr. Perfect is buried in. So I was looking over there, I was thinking about it, I said, you know what, I should do that Mr. Perfect top 5, and that's exactly where we have landed. And personally, I was always a big Mr. Perfect fan. Back in the day, I caught wind of him at his tail end of his AWA day, right before he went to the WWF, and he stole my heart and never let go at an early age. And I think back to my first impressions of Mr. Perfect, I loved him, but I didn't understand why I loved him. You know, at that early age, I was Ultimate Warrior, I was Demolition, I was, you know, some of the bigger guys out there, and some of the other crazy characters I really enjoyed, but I enjoyed Mr. Perfect's work from the get-go out there. And being a little kid, I don't know if I understood exactly why. Well, all these years later, as I look back, that was the first real ring technician I really had a deep love for. Obviously, it helped me at Bobby Heenan and his manager, because I've always been a huge Bobby Heenan fan. But his ring work was unparalleled back then, and a big breath of fresh air compared to some of the rest of the WWF roster at the time. Very similar to Bret Hart in my mind. Is I always liked Bret Hart, but I didn't know why at an early age, and it's very because of that. Mr. Perfect made his guys look good. He made every opponent look good. He would bump all over for them, and when you're little, you don't understand all that, but then you really appreciate it more as you get older and you understand things more. And I just absolutely loved Mr. Perfect at an early age. And I'll never forget seeing him do his gum spit for the first time ever. I'm sure you guys out there have done the gum spit as well. I still do it to this day. Just absolutely perfect. And then the vignettes through the years. But I will say Mr. Perfect has been a little bit underrated in the action figure department. Now, it is true he's not the most toyetic character of all time. There's no face paint. There's no real fancy outfits. Not a lot of different colors and stuff like that through the years. So that does hurt his release schedule, I guess. Be if we're talking about Hasbro, Jakks, Mattel. He's a little bit plain. I guess that's a fair enough assessment out there. So we haven't been bombarded with the amount of Mr. Perfect figures over the years compared to, you know, an Ultimate Warrior or somebody like Hulk Hogan, something like that. John Cena even. But there are a few Mr. Perfect figures, and there's enough to do a top 5 list to talk about, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So grab something to drink, grab your list, let's get into it. Let's talk the top 5 Mr. Perfect figures as voted by me. All right, let's kick off the Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig top 5 with number 5. We're going to count them back with number 5 being my least favorite to my first one being, of course, my favorite. So we're kicking it off at number 5 with Curt Hennig Mr. Perfect's latest release. This is the last figure that came out for him. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about WWE Mattel Elite Retro Fest. Yes, the Retro Fest line gave us a Mr. Perfect, part of the Double Up Club on that one. I love the Retro Fest line. It's a smaller line, so it was easy to get all of them, mint on card and for loose set right here. I believe Mr. Perfect, though, did not go to GameStop. If my memory serves me right, he was through Target. I could be wrong, but I think it was him and Iron Sheik that went through the Target website, so that's where I ended up getting them from. I'm fairly confident on that. But I like this Mr. Perfect. By no means my favorite Mattel Elite Mr. Perfect, so that's a little spoiler of what's to come. But it is his most recent figure. Mint on card, the packaging is great on the Retrofest. As you guys know, we love the Retrofest package. But I do love that we got Mr. Perfect in black. We did get a black version of Mr. Perfect in the Jakks Class Superstar series, but I do think this one is a tad better than that one. It is Mr. Perfect in his black gear, and I personally use this for WCW Mr. Perfect, and I keep this on my WCW shelf with the NWO group, which of course Mr. Perfect was a part of. He does come with his patented towel. I love that we got the towel with Mr. Perfect. I would love to get some gum spitting action with a Mr. Perfect one of these days. Get the open hand and him flinging it like that. That would be something for sure. But we do get the towel as an accessory, which we don't get a whole lot, but not a lot of other accessories you can give to somebody like Mr. Perfect. But he definitely fits in the Retrofest line. He does come with the Intercontinental title, so that is always a nice touch out there as well. But like I said, I display this one as the NWO. You might do the same thing in your Mr. Perfect display. But that's it. Number 5 for me, Mattel Elite Retrofest Mr. Perfect. All right, we're to the number 4 spot on my top 5 Mr. Perfect figures of all time, and this is one of his most iconic figures ever, and I'm sure a lot of you guys own this one or definitely know about this one. And we're going all the way back to the Hasbro days. We're going to the Hasbro line, and we're going to Hasbro Mr. Perfect Series 3 in the yellow signet. Signet? The yellow singlet, Mr. Perfect. Yes, we are. This was such a game changer for young Kyle playing with his toys out there, really getting things to the next level in my figure fed. Like I said, Mr. Perfect was a bump machine, a working machine. Him going against Warrior, him going against Hogan in my Hasbro fig fed playing days was just great. I was so happy to get this figure. And the other thing that's even greater about this figure is he has one of the best, if not the best, stances for a wrestling figure in the Hasbro line. There's so much playability with this figure, and that's what I love the most. You could do all kinds of stuff. You could do clotheslines, you could do suplexes, DDTs. I mean, you could do a lot with him, where some of the other ones, like some of the jumpers out there, Bear Hug Hogan, there's a lot of them out there that were really limited in their playability. This Mr. Perfect figure had about the greatest playability that we had seen at the time from the Hasbro line, and just a great figure all around. There's not a lot of bells and whistles, and we're going to say that about every figure we talk about today. He's got his yellow singlet, his white boots, nice tan that Curt Hennig always had back in the day. So it just looks good. It looks like Mr. Perfect shrunk down, especially back then. You know exactly who this is all these years later. You show this to somebody, hey, who is this? If they know wrestling a little bit, they'll say, oh, that's Mr. Perfect. And that's what you want in any wrestling figure. I don't care what era, that somebody can call it what it is and not knowing who it is. So really good, really charming there. I just love this figure. So many hours playing with this figure as a little kid. Just really do like this one out there. And I'm sure a lot of you guys, this is probably on your list. I can't imagine a top 5 list not having this Mr. Perfect at least somewhere in there. But like I said, put your list down below. So there it is, Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, Hasbro, Series 3. All right, we're about the halfway spot here in the Mr. Perfect Top 5 countdown, and number 3 for me is a bit of a sleeper. Maybe forgotten, maybe passed over for some of you guys out there, and you guys can let me know in the comments for sure, but we're going to Mattel with this one, but maybe not where you think we're going. This is a Mattel Basic. Yes, Basic. Mattel Basic Series 37, Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig. Love this one. This was a must-have pickup the minute this came out. You guys know I dabble in basics. I don't get a whole lot. And outside of Ultimate Warrior, I never really got basics back in the day. I get every Warrior, but everything else I passed on, except this Mr. Perfect. I said, oh, I gotta have this Mr. Perfect. And this is a Mr. Perfect that is screaming to be released in the Elite line, hopefully maybe 2022. We'll see what happens. But his yellow singlet, I would say, is probably his most iconic. I don't know if anybody disagree with that. I think when most people close their eyes and think of Mr. Perfect, they think of the yellow singlet for the most part. It's very iconic. But we got this in a Mattel Basic where, like I said, I think there's room and there's enough meat on the bone to give this to us again with an Elite. You give it an Intercontinental title, you give it a towel, maybe a few other bells and whistles there, we'll see. But I hope Mattel comes to it and gives us one of these in Elite one day. But as of right now, we got to be happy with this Basic Series 37. Now, I did take the title belt, the Intercontinental title, from the Retrofest, and I gave it to this Mr. Perfect, as I always think of Mr. Perfect with the yellow with the Intercontinental title. just like this one a whole lot. A little bit orangier on the hair than yellower, which doesn't bother me at all, and I think he does have that. On the back of his singlet, he does have the black, which Mr. Perfect, a lot of people think he had the solid colored singlets, but he'd always have a different color a lot of the time on the back. But there's not a lot to say about this figure. There's not a lot of details there. It just is Mr. Perfect. You know it's Mr. Perfect. And it's just a great outfit for him, as we saw in the Hasbro one. I love the yellow Mr. Perfect gear, and that's why Basic Series 37 from Mattel comes in at number 3 on our list. All right, we're down to the final 2 Mr. Perfect figures. Hopefully you got your list together. Maybe I'm swaying it. Maybe there's some of these ones we've talked about today you've forgotten about. Maybe not, but we're at the number 2 spot. And number 2, we head to Jakks. Jakks Classic Superstars. You guys know a favorite line of mine. Hopefully yours as well. But we're going to take it Classic Superstars Series 10 Mr. Perfect. So Classic Superstars Series 10 Mr. Perfect, a beautiful one, part of the ticket promotion, of course. He did come with his old patented towel there, but we got him in the orange gear. A little bit of an underrated gear choice for Mr. Perfect in the orange gear, but this was the first Mr. Perfect figure to go to the next level. I mean, the Hasbro one was next level at the time, but to get us into the modern day age of Jakks, Mattel, and where we are right now, this is our first entrant, is how I always figure it as. And it was such a big deal to get this in the Classic Superstars line. Of course he fits as a Classic Superstar. We got him in Series 10. Like we said, we got him later in the black singlet. We also got a Manager's Edition in a 3-pack with Ric Flair and Bobby Heenan, which is, it's okay. It's not my favorite. It's okay. But I absolutely love this orange one, and I was so hard on the hunt for this one in this set. And this was a very solid set as well. It had Dusty Rhodes, Bruno Sammartino, Sabu, The Rock, Harley Race, Greg Valentine, and Gorilla Monsoon in it. So this was a bit of a heavy hitter set, as most Jakks Class Superstars line sets were heavy hitter sets. But this was the one, him and Sabu, I wanted the most out of that Series 10, and I was just happy to get him. And it was pretty cool to get him in the orange, but once again, I was like, gosh, I can't believe they didn't go with yellow, but hey, it is what it is. I don't mind this orange. Knowing what we know now, knowing what we know with our Mr. Perfect figures, we did get an orange Elite later on, but that one, kind of the shine was wore off because we already had this one in the past. If this wouldn't have came out and we never got a Jackson orange, that orange Mattel would have been like, holy cow, look at this thing. But that all being said, Series 10 Classic Superstars, my favorite Jakks Classic Superstar of Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig. So now we're down to it. Next up is number 1. Who made number 1 on your Mr. Perfect list? Well, stay tuned to find out who's on mine. All right, it's finally here. We've come to the number 1 spot. My number 1 Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig figure of all time. Hopefully you have your list. It'll be interesting if any of you guys have this one on your list or in the number 1 spot. But as you guys know in these videos, I always put my set together. Here's my top 5. I sleep on it. I come back the next day, and maybe things need to change. Maybe they don't. And in this case, this is where I closed my eyes, and I said, what Mr. Perfect one do I think of as number 1? And this remained the same throughout. And now this one may surprise some of you guys out there. It could be controversial. I don't know how controversial it could really be because it is my list. And that's why I always say put your list in the comments below. But number 1 for me, we go back to Hasbro. We go to Series 8 Hasbro, Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig in the blue singlet with the yellow on the back, of course. Now, this is not that much different from the Series 3 Mr. Perfect, as you guys fully aware by now. And I gotta tell you, back in the day, collecting Hasbros as they came out, I didn't always buy doubles of characters. Now, Bear Hug Hogan, I got that for my birthday or something. I did get that third Hulk Hogan because guess what? That's the best Hulk Hogan Hasbro figure ever. And then you move to things like the Ultimate Warrior. Of course, I'm getting every Ultimate Warrior out there. But when it comes to like Tatanka getting re-released and Ted DiBiase, I said, you know, I don't need the shirtless Ted DiBiase. I'm fine with the green or the black suit. I have both those in my collection. Bret Hitman Hart, he had 2 different skin tones out there. I was happy with my single, the first release, in the whiter skin tone. I said, I don't need this. Undertaker, had the original Undertaker. He came with his coat. I said, I don't need this because I already have that Undertaker. He's not going to wrestle in the coat anyways. You get where I'm going with that. Later on, as an adult collector, I said I have to have every single one. I picked up every single one. However, as a kid, This Mr. Perfect, not a ton of meat on the bone between these two, but I love blue so much. I loved Mr. Perfect so much. I said, I have to have both of these. Why? I don't know. They're basically the same thing. They're the same action, same figure, same head, just painted a different singlet color. But that was enough for me to say, I need this Mr. Perfect. The blue always pops in my eyes. I always loved it. I just love this figure and everything. Even though it's so similar to this one, just the color difference moved it from a bottom of my list of my top 5 to this one being the top of my top 5. A little strange, because I keep saying they're basically the exact same figure, just changed a bit. But that's how big of a Mr. Perfect fan was. I want the updated singlet with him. I wanted to get the most updated Mr. Perfect. I love Mr. Perfect. I love the carding. Even though as a kid I threw the carding away, of course. But it was enough for me. It was enough. It's a weird one. I don't think of any other top 5 we're going to do where this kind of scenario would take place again. It's so strange, but it's what it is. For Mr. Perfect, for me, this is number 1. This is when I close my eyes, I think of this Mr. Perfect. But it all goes back to Mr. Perfect, not the most toyetic guy, hasn't had a ton of figures. We didn't talk about 2 of his Jakks ones, the one in the black, of course, the manager, Mr. Perfect. We had 2 more elites in blue and, orange, as I look over. Blue and orange, those just weren't enough for me. It was just the specialness of this Mr. Perfect that got him in my list. But I'm hopeful we'll get some more Mr. Perfects. I'd love a manager, maybe a Build-A-Figure Mr. Perfect as a manager one of these days. And I would love, a yellow elite, maybe an ultimate edition. It'd be great if we could get some of that stuff in the future. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a clamoring at this point in time for Mr. Perfect figures. There should be. I just don't know if he's high on a lot of legend lists from people that they want, because we've had some in the past, and like we say, he doesn't change his gear a whole lot. But for me, Series 8 Mr. Perfect from the Hasbro line, that's got to be number 1. But I'm interested to hear your top 5. You guys put them in order. Put it in the comments down below. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're marching towards 10,000 subscribers, whether or not you know it or not. That's what we're doing. So we're going to get there. We're going to do a top 10 Ultimate Warrior. We're going to do a bunch of giveaways. We'll do a Q&A video. There'll be some fun stuff. So once we get to 10,000, let the party begin. So make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell. Follow me on social media at SirPaul64 on Twitter, _Kyle_Peterson on Instagram, and of course, ProWrestlingTees.com. Search Kyle Peterson. So for the Mr. Perfect top 5 list, I'm Kyle. See you guys all real soon.